Good afternoon. So I want to just pick up some of the themes of the day and talk about the IoT Security Foundation and what our plans are. First of all, this is our mission statement. I won't read it aloud, but the eagle-eyed amongst you might spot the fact that it's very slightly different from what's on our website. And the reason for that is that we have actually had our first plenary meeting yesterday, and one of the things we discussed was the mission statement, and so it has changed just slightly as a result of the plenary meeting. So I want to pick up later what the plenary meeting is all about and what the plenary group will do. I found that Paul and I have had no communication at all, but I found a lot of the things that he said resonated very loud with me. I think one of the things that in the foundation we strongly feel is that there is a supply chain, and there has to be a chain of trust. And what we want to do is to provide the tools to build up trust between the players in the chain. So typically in the Internet of Things, we will have gadgets, things. We tend to think, of course, about the end devices as being the fundamental thing, but we will have a lot of devices in the field which will range over complexity from something which is really simple, like a thermostat or a temperature sensor, all the way up to a car. So a huge variety of hardware things. And a lot of those, either in whole or in part, will be developed by developers who may have today very little experience or knowledge in security, and possibly very little commitment at the end of the day to the end service that will be delivered based on the things that they develop. And you'll have the product suppliers or the brands who may be commissioning the development of those devices. They'll be using communication providers, perhaps, like the cellular operators. There may be service providers. So an interesting model here is if you look at the electricity supply industry, where you have people supply meters, people supply metering services based on those meters. You have the cellular operators who handle the data. You have the service providers who are actually supplying you with electricity. And of course you have the service users at the end of the day. So you have to have some kind of chain of trust between the different players, because the overall security will depend on each player's performance. And the relationships between the players need to be contractual, and that means they need to have some kind of service level agreement between them. So you have to satisfy your customer when you supply something that what you supply is secure. And what we want to do is to provide the tools that allow the players in the value chain to do that. So our role we see is to describe and promote best practice for IoT security. We want to provide a set of guidelines which are, first of all, authoritative. So we have the best people in the industry across a lot of different disciplines, not just encryption, but a lot of other things as well, participating to help us develop these. They need to be specific. So they need to guide you on the kinds of things that you should do and the kinds of things you should avoid. So do manage your keys correctly. Don't try and roll your own encryption algorithm, that kind of thing. But in a great deal of detail, so that they are helpful to you. They'll tell you where to go and look for the standards that you need to use, for example. They need to be flexible, because it's no good trying to apply the type of security processes and procedures that are appropriate for a Tesla to a connected thermostat, because it just won't be possible with the resources you have available. So we need to give options which will suit the needs of the different players in that chain of trust. And they need to be appropriate to the class of objects and services and threats that are there. And they need to be resilient, and I think this is a theme that's come out today several times, that you need to make sure, you need to make recommendations to help people to understand how to maintain security throughout the life of the product, to maintain security when and not if a breach occurs, because you should assume that a breach will occur. One of the things that occurred to me during the Tesla presentation is that we discussed the problems that would arise when you're using software, which itself you're using open source software because that's available and has got this fantastic legacy of people providing fixes. But the particular version you're using may only be supported for perhaps 5 years or so. Of course, there is another issue which I'm not sure I have any answers for, but another problem, which is what happens when the supplier of the device or the service themselves goes out of business. So you may have millions of devices in the field which are still operating, but there's nobody who's responsible for them anymore. That's an interesting point about who's responsible for security. So the way we're structured, we have a board, which was formed in the summer. I'll talk a bit more about the history. And the board is figures from that supply chain, really, with players from Vodafone, like Steve, from BT and other players, Imagination and so on. And really the board is responsible for strategy. The most important group, in my view, is the plenary group. And the plenary group is the members, and we have quite a few members of the foundation in the room today, and I hope a lot of you will also, who are not members today will like to join. And the plenary group is the one that will actually push our activities forward, and to a large extent will guide what we do. And the way that they will produce the outputs that we produce will be through working groups, which will be driven by volunteers from within the membership, who will join working groups to generate. To generate what? Well, let's talk about that. What we do is to generate these, now can I make this? Yes. What we want to do is to generate guidelines for best practice. These aren't standards. We don't want to produce standards. The great thing about standards is that there's an awful lot of them to choose from. So we don't want to provide yet more standards. That's just going to confuse people. But what we do want to do is to guide people as to what standards are appropriate and how to use them. Where we need to do that, because of course there are already groups that are doing that in certain areas, so we want to complement that. And I think a really important part of what we want to do is this. We want to provide a self-certification scheme around the guidelines. And there are already models for this, for example, from the payment card industry, where we provide guidelines, which are, if you like, a checklist, but they're rather more than checklists. They're very detailed and specific. And they tell you the kind of things that you need to do, for example, with respect to your suppliers. So if you have a supplier that is developing a product and some software, then you need to make sure that, for example, they have a secure software development lifecycle. What does that mean? These are the things that you should look for. These are the questions that you should ask your supplier. This is the evidence that you should look for from the supplier. So very specific things and very detailed things, so that you can put together a set of documentation with respect to your product or service, that around which you can ask for certification. When I say self-certification, it doesn't necessarily involve any party that's actually doing any testing. You're providing the evidence. And in return for that, you are able to use a service mark. We haven't determined what that might be, but it means that the IoT Security Foundation is setting a set of guidelines which this particular supplier is following, and as a result of that, they're able to use this service mark, which provides their customer with some assurance that the product or service is secure. So in order to use that, you need to be a member of the foundation. And of course, one of the, if you like, the teeth is that if you don't follow those guidelines, or if it turns out there's a breach and you've willfully not followed the guidelines, then you lose that ability to use the service mark. So the inputs that we take will be from standards. I've mentioned that. So there are an awful lot of standards and protocols and so on that you can use for security. There are going to be industry needs. A lot of things that both the industry and society at large will tell us that are needed, or that internally we see are needed. And of course, very importantly, there is the knowledge about security breaches that actually occur, and we can help to advise people, inform people as to how those breaches came about and what could have been done to improve them. Obviously trying to do that in an anonymous way. So all of these things will be done through our membership. So why join? So we would like you to join us if you're not already a member. So if you're already a player in the industry and you have good security practice, then help to ensure that this nascent industry grows without major security flaws. Help to educate your customer base and indeed to educate your suppliers to secure the supply chain. If you're starting to develop connected products, I have a friend who's recently become the development director of an existing very large service company that at the moment is simply services, has no products, but he's joined them to develop a product which will become part of a service. And he comes from a background in developing electrical consumer products and getting them into production in low-cost places to make things like China, and getting them into the market and making sure that they are safe to use, they meet the safety approvals and so on. He's not an expert in connectivity or communications or security, and he, if you like, he's my target market, so that he's got somewhere to go to tell him all the things that he, in developing the products, and his suppliers and his company need to think through in launching their product and service. So we will provide a forum where he can talk to and learn from the experts. Also to help us to expand our work by explaining what his needs are and benefit at the end of the day from our certification scheme. So who's involved? Well, we have a founding board that includes members from Vodafone, BT, Imagination, Copperhorse Solutions, Secure Things, Royal Holloway College, Pentest Partners, University of Bristol, which is where I come from, and all brought together by NMI. Membership is open globally to all companies and organizations concerned with building, procuring, and using IoT systems, really from expert to novice. You can see our website. That's one way to join. You can talk to any member of the foundation or from NMI today. One of the things I should say, which perhaps isn't so evident, if you are already an NMI member, you can become a member of the foundation at no extra cost. So that's one route. A surprising number of people who are NMI members don't realise that that's open to them. If you are not an NMI member and you decide you want to become a member of the foundation, and if you join us before the end of the year, then you will get the members' price for this conference. So hopefully that will be a little bit of an incentive. So far, we started in May. There was the IoT Security Summit at Bletchley Park, which was brought together by NMI. I was there. That was really my first contact. Actually, it was, in many ways, it kind of opened my eyes to some of the problems in IoT security. There was something like 112 people registered for that, and at that meeting, there was a straw poll at the end to see if we should try and build on that and take something forward. Very, very strong support. So the Security Foundation was formed, and we had our first board meeting in July, if I remember rightly. And in September, the foundation was launched. And I think, for me, actually the most important milestone was yesterday, when we held our first plenary meeting in Docklands. So that's the first time we brought the members together to talk about what we were going to do and to discuss some of the issues. I think that was a successful meeting. We explored how we would work, what our aims and objective should be at a high level, and also to try and be a bit more specific about our initial work programme. So what would we like to achieve from here? Well, our aims for 2016 are, first of all, quite early on, to publish some broad industry guidelines. So we want to publish some documents, which might be white papers or might be blogs or something else like that, which describe a bit about the security landscape for IoT, to do some mapping of standards and standards development organisations, just to try and put that information in one place, and to provide a simple checklist as a kind of sticking plaster, if you like, for companies and developers, so that they can look somewhere to get at least some initial information about the kind of thing they should be doing. We want to build the membership, and we want to internationalise. And we want to start work on the hard work of our initial guidelines, and we want to publish those within the year. And we've identified 3 areas that we want to set up working groups and work on. First of all, and this is in no particular order actually, but we want to work on patching and updating constrained devices. And we want to work on security guidelines for connected consumer products. And we want to get the basic definition of the self-certification scheme in place. So please join us and help to do that. There's one more thing that we want to do next year, and that is that we want to have another conference like this, probably towards the end of the year in the UK. And hopefully we'll be able to build on the success of this conference and have even more of you at that meeting. So that's all I want to say, really.